I'm so excited to present this panel. The topic is the office dead? We've got Uptin Saiidi, who's a journalist and video creator. We've also got Tom Moran, Chief Strategy Officer at Prodoscore. We may have an additional panelist joining us shortly. The world of virtual events means we're tracking people down where they are in the world. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you today?
Good morning. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, well, we've got one more panelist that I think is in the process of logging in, so I'm going to hand this off to Saiidi to moderate, and I'll just enjoy from here. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Thanks for that handover. And good morning, Mike. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world everyone else is. But I know you're on the East Coast of the US. How are you doing?
Great.
Very good. All good.
Wonderful. And Karen is going to join us shortly. So why don't we just start off by telling us, if you could tell us a little bit about, you said, you know, the office is not dead, but it's changed forever. Tell us, you know, why you think that and what you guys have been going through as a result of the past 6 or I guess 9 months now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of us are sharing in the fact that the office as we knew it is forever changed. And most importantly, you know, we all think about the fact, is the workplace a destination or is it an environment where I can contribute, where you can contribute? And when we look at senior executives embracing a distributed workforce model, it means that they're providing an opportunity for their employees, their management team, everyone to engage in a way, the environment of their choice, where they're contributing, they're performing, and executing against the outcomes. You know, communication becomes so vitally important to so many elements, Uptin, of virtual collaboration, of continuing to encourage creativity, continuing to empower managers and employees to ultimately encourage individual productivity as well.
Mm-hmm. And what are you seeing in terms of just employee engagement and morale? Because I think that's something, you know, according to one study, 1 in 3 employees right now feel disconnected to their colleagues as a result of the pandemic. So how are you seeing companies, and your company included, you know, kind of adapt? I mean, how do you create that synergy of the water cooler in the virtual environment?
Yeah, the virtual culture, you know, is a bit of a challenge, and you know, sometimes pausing and you know, maybe some detox, if you will, from the digital engagement helps people to clear the minds a bit. You know, data is certainly available, and data is available to help keep, Karen, people stay balanced with respect to their performance. You know, it doesn't replace that inherent requirement for strong people skills, you know, good judgment and ability. You know, everyone is searching for that human connection. And, you know, should we strictly be limited to virtual collaboration? We can't anymore. You know, we got to, you know, we're searching for different ways to keep people engaged and comfortable. You know, you see so many executives with strong business continuity plans that maybe the piece that was lacking was that human element and consideration for that. And you know, it's what everyone is scrambling in, hopefully in the right way to you know, engage employees and make them feel connected. Keeping people from being overwhelmed, keeping people from being, you know, at risk of attrition because they're distraught, and you know, the virtual engagement is certainly a different complexity for everyone to think about, and most importantly, management and leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Karen. Welcome.
Hello. The snacks backstage were amazing. The Danish was delicious, and I got caught up in a conversation. Plus, it's such a long way from the green room to being on stage. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you tried the coffee, because that's been my favorite part. Why don't you give us a quick introduction, since we missed you, to our audience?
So I'm Karen Mangia, Vice President of Customer and Market Insights at Salesforce, and author of 2 pandemic publications, Working from Home, Making the New Normal Work for You, and Listen Up, How to Tune into Customers and Turn Down the Noise.
Wonderful. And I have to ask about the timeline of working from home. Is this something that you previously had in mind, or this is something you rushed to market with?
Well, this is a time of opportunity if we choose to see it that way. And I'd actually submitted the manuscript for this Listen Up book on May 1st. About a week and a half later, I got started talking with my publisher and sharing the work I was doing on our company's work from home task force and a blog series about working from home I was writing. And she said, working from home, do you think you could write a book about that? And I laughed. I said, in my sleep. She said, do you think you could write it in 2 weeks? I said, no. She said, how about 30 days? And I said the two words that changed everything for me, and they will for you too, which were why not? So wrote the book in 30 days and it came to market in less than 90, amazingly. Wow. In fact. So huge kudos to Wiley. And yeah, it was an adventure. It was very 2020, I like to say.
Yeah, anything goes. And I like that. I love that. Why not? That's a good one. Well, wonderful. Well, why don't we start by asking you then, in terms of, overall, let's just address the question of the panel with you. Is the office dead? What is the office going to look like?
I was thinking back to 9/11, and I was on a plane in flight, asleep, and woke up and looked out the window and saw I was landing in a city that I didn't recognize, which was very odd and made me wonder how long I had slept. And I remember thinking, when I landed and, started hearing what was going on, I remember thinking, I'll never fly again. People will never fly again. I flew 235,000 miles last year. I think never is a strong word to use. It's not that people are never going back to the office. What I believe people will settle into is more of a hybrid and distributed work culture where there's more flexibility, autonomy, and choice about where work happens. Sometimes at home, sometimes, in a physical office. I don't think it's that we're never going back. It's that I believe we'll find a greater degree of balance.
Mm-hmm. And, I was actually based in Hong Kong for most of the pandemic. I'm now in Los Angeles. And, one thing I noticed in China is that a couple of people that I interviewed have said to me that, coming out of the pandemic, coming out of COVID-19 in China, was that their office situation wasn't all or nothing, kind of like you said. So one VC particular was saying that, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, all employees come to the office. Every Tuesday, Thursday, all employees work from home. So it's not like some employees are remote and others are coming in and others are just choosing when to come. So it really does create that, all hands on synergy, or everyone's kind of at home as a remote employee. So what do you think, obviously every company at different sizes and locations will look a little bit different, but what are some of the possible scenarios you think, Karen, that might play out as? I mean, we saw, a large share of CEOs either downsizing or giving up their office space, right? So what do you kind of anticipate that actually looking like?
It depends on your organization's culture. For some organizations that will look like what you just described, which is we're all shift workers now. We'll let you know the shift that you punch into the office, when you punch out at the end of your shift, as well as when we'll see you here in person again. Others will offer the choice to employees. They'll extend that trust to their employees to make the decision about where they need to be to work at their best. And some organizations are even trying out a little bit of this now with simple starts like no video meeting Mondays, right? Trying out, varying the mode, of how work happens, even in this virtual environment, that maybe it doesn't have to be all video meetings all the time to get things done. So the organizational structure that ultimately plays out really depends on your culture. But I think the organizations that will do the best with flexibly moving between being in person and virtual really focused on trust, communication, and accountability.
Mm-hmm. Thomas, how about you, Tom?
Yeah, I to dovetail off that a bit, I think it comes back to confidence with the most senior executive leadership in their plan, culture, whether it's bottom up, top down, somewhere in between. People have to be confident about a new way of working. And when we engage and talk about those senior executives that are digitally distraught, Those that are digitally determined, it really relates to that culture piece and having confidence about the decisions that are being made. One of the larger challenges of this is trying to replicate maybe a process, a management process that was in place while people were in cubicles, coming to an office at a certain time, a certain schedule, taking breaks. That is forever changed, and we're not coming back to that. That piece is for sure. If we try to stick with permanence with any one aspect of process and try to replicate over and over again, it won't work. All of this DX, all of this transformation, is it about the digitization? Is it about the tools? Or is it really about change management and giving guidance and using those digital tools and those data points as a way to build confidence, whether that confidence ensures the culture of trust, whether it helps managers lead differently? That's what it comes down to. So I think it really starts with giving people data points, baselines to understand how they build off of that and not try to replicate what they were doing before, because it will not work.
And what is an example of that data? Because I know we're seeing more and more, startups and massive companies that are rushing to figure out the data game of how do you use data to understand employees, performance and productivity, and even just how much they feel connected to their job and things like that. So, how do you find the balance between, actually, can you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, look, first of all, I'd say that I intensely believe in the power of AI, and I think it can deliver very positive transformation if it's utilized in the right way. Prodoscore approaches the marketplace with data, with regards to seamless data that's not intrusive, it's not invasive, it doesn't require input, it doesn't disrupt workflow, and it helps to build that virtual collaboration. It will not replace emotion, the right emotions. It's a balance of emotion and logic. Everything we do, also a balance of art and a science to different roles and organizations. And most importantly, I think for leadership, there has to be a strong balance of empathy with objectivity. So when you look at the data providing the truer logic and science and objective aspects, but not disregarding how powerful that can be, and making sure that people stay focused on the human element, that's what we encourage. We encourage that through subject matter expertise and coaching in organizations. So strongly believe in the power of AI, but just utilizing that in the right way. Karen, I'd love your perspective on that as well.
Well, what I think is so critically important before deploying any kind of AI or digital tools is to understand what's the problem you're trying to solve and for whom. I hear so often, especially being in the technology business, people tossing out these phrases because everyone else is doing them. Well, let's roll out a digital transformation strategy. That's clearly the solution. And I think, people before process is my philosophy, because we have to understand who we're serving, the problem we're trying to solve, and a clear definition or outcome of what success looks like. And while tools like AI and data can be wonderful to help us augment our intelligence, they can also give us a false sense of security sometimes, that we have a sense that human behavior is entirely predictable and we know what's going to happen next. And just ask anyone who's received that survey from a big client who got the 5 out of 5 only to have the client not renew their contract the next week. That single signal is effectively false. So I'm all about starting with the people, and also that data and any kind of tool that automates perception or helps us guide and to make decisions definitely needs to be viewed through a healthy lens of some other data points to balance the conversation, and certainly rich dialogue to add some context to that data. Statistics without stories will potentially lead you down an inerrant path.
I love that. And Karen,
sometimes, yes.
Say that again. I had two of you at once. We both had the coffee backstage, so it's a lot of excitement.
Sometimes it lends itself towards a data confirmation bias. What we think we know, data will help prove it one way or the other. What we think we know versus really stepping back, pausing, and considering more multidimensional elements.
Yes, I'll never forget the time when I was asked to judge a student competition at a university. Have you ever done this before, where there's like the business case or the challenge they have to solve, and you're the business expert that's solving it or listening to their presentations and evaluating them? So one aspect of the presentation was they had to deliver the projected ROI of their project, right? They had come up with this solution. And I listened to this one number. I mean, and I'm making this up now, it was something like $1 trillion. And so I start asking, because I realize there's clearly a finance major in the group that's put together some sophisticated model. And I start asking some questions. It's all very sketchy math in my mind. And at the end, my fellow panelists, we were giving some feedback to the group. And he said, if you say a statistic or a data point to your mother, and she would question it with no knowledge of your job, it should give you pause to say, is this true? Is this real? Is this believable? And then that just stuck with me, because it happens. And sometimes we put this almost false confidence in something else to just tell us the path, right? And we go along with it without stopping to question, like, is this true? Is this real? Is this believable? I loved it. I hope he went on to, his finance career somewhere, but maybe grounded in a little bit more reality.
That's a great story. I love that. Yeah. So one thing you mentioned, Karen, is that, we romanticize the office because we can no longer go to the office. So in terms of, I've read kind of mixed reports that say X percent, speaking of data, I don't even remember the percentages, but X percentage of people absolutely love working from home and they never want to go back. And then, I mentioned earlier in this panel, a third of employees feel disconnected as a result, and they long for that human interaction, right? So I mean, how does a company like Salesforce and companies globally think about being able to accommodate the two sides here?
I think that we have all written a story during this pandemic, and for lots of people, it starts with once upon a time, I went to a magical place called an office. And in the office, it was fun and everyone was productive and there was no wasted time. There, I felt a sense of communication, belonging, seen, heard, and felt. And all of my career wishes and dreams were able to come true. P.S. There was also free coffee and snacks, and that's expensive when you have to supply it yourself at home. Now, the reality is we had lots of meetings we did not need at the office that were not productive. We had lots of coworkers who interrupted us to have conversations when we were trying to get things done. And more often than not, when we walked by lots of our boss's office to ask a question or deliver information, we were met with, all right, got it. Did you feel seen, heard, and connected when I just did that? But see, now that we can't go there, it's a wonderful place where we believe everything was perfect. And we've crafted this relationship with our circumstances where we're longing for something to be what it once was. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. Because what happens is, go ahead.
Oh, it's a beautiful, well, I just want to say you forgot, traffic and commuting as well, right?
Oh, well, that was just our routines, rituals, and boundaries so we can get in the work zone and leave it and have a reason to leave work. You had to beat the traffic. That's why you had to leave the office. Now you don't need to beat the traffic. It's why you keep going to all those conference calls till late at night, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you don't have to beat the traffic, shouldn't you be at your desk? I mean, that's sort of like where we are in this logic in a lot of ways.
So is there a way to help employees understand what you just said, right? Because I mean, I was one of them. I mentioned to you guys earlier about, I don't know, this was maybe in June. I was in Hong Kong and, my company came to me and said, hey, how desperate are you to go back to the office? Because we're going to allow a couple people back to the office, but we really want to prioritize the ones who absolutely need to be there, the ones who are just like, this whole work from home thing isn't working out. And I was replying to that Slack or that email, and I was about to say, no, I cannot stand working from home anymore. I need to go back to the office. Like I'm dying over here. And then I thought it through, and I realized, is this going to be one of those things where I get access to the office, I go 1 or 2 days, and then I'm kind of like, oh, geez, what a long commute, what a long, everything you just outlined, Karen. And especially when, 2/3, if not more of my team isn't even in the office, and I really, don't necessarily understand why I'm there. And then I go back and say, well, actually, I know you made this exception and let me come back to the office. But in reality, like I was actually pretty happy working from home. So I can literally, relate to that story. So how do you help employees, understand that?
Well, you hit it. You said in the message, it was, are you desperate to go back to the office? what we're desperate for is variety and choice. You know, to some degree, I think we all felt we had a larger degree of freedom when we could take the meetings from the coffee shop or take the call from the car in our commute. And we've lost variety. I mean, most of us are in the same place doing kind of the same thing every day. And there's a monotony to that, right? That requires us to think about how to change up our environment so that we can stay engaged and excited about the work that we're doing. Because to your point, I mean, cubicles without camaraderie is just essentially a different place to do the same activity. Right. And so, you know, we think about a couple of things, and you had mentioned, you know, how is Salesforce thinking about this? You know, first and foremost, in terms of consideration about going back to the office or not, is all about keeping people safe. So certainly it's, you know, working with prevailing governance and, you know, health data about how to keep people safe and whether that's a safe choice. So that's first and foremost on our minds, and I know on the minds of many of the companies watching as well. The second is we're doing our own kind of Salesforce on Salesforce story using a product we brought to market during the pandemic called work.com. And among many things that it does to help you facilitate a distributed workforce where some people could be in the office, some people are virtual, lots of strategies and tools to handle, you know, technical support, for example, and employee communications, but also it has contact tracing. So we use our own product, and, you know, it's the health check at the office if you're able to go to an office. So it's, you know, how do we do it safely? But along the way, you know, from a bigger picture perspective, we're really trying to think through what do we put in place to make distributed teams work? You know, in the future going forward, whether the definition of distributed teams is someone's in the office and someone's in a home office, or someone's in the San Francisco office and someone's in the London office, that's still a distributed team environment. So it's giving us an opportunity to be thoughtful about the culture and also, you know, how we support employees in being effective in a scenario that could be dynamic for the foreseeable future.
Tom, what's your take about the balancing?
I think we're all looking for that human connection, and I think it starts with being present. Certainly, everyone is a bit fatigued with respect to some video collaboration tools. Some days are tougher than others with respect to that. And secondly, you know, sometimes we long for things that we don't have. And, you know, when we think about this kind of things that were happening in an office, how many of those things were really enriching? How many of those things really empowered us to perform better versus were distractions, and distractions are fine and good. But, you know, I think it really is about being present. I mean, how many times have we engaged in video collaboration calls where people's cameras were being turned on and off, where they were glancing at cell phones, where they were glancing at a tablet, you know, they were distracted, you know. I think it's really powerful to, you know, that human connection is what we're searching for. And sometimes it comes up in different ways with encouraging more of an analog choice. And it's interesting sometimes the power of journaling for people. And, you know, I think to an organization, without mentioning their name, US-based getaway type properties, weekend retreats, if you will, that actually have cell phone lock boxes now, so that people are less distracted by the digital world, and allowing people to engage in, you know, whether it's spiritual, whether it's meditation, whether it's pausing to refresh in the right way. I think we need to do that in the work environment too, and continue to encourage that. And, you know, if we're at a place where we've got to lock our cell phones or our tablets in a box to get away from them, something is wrong, right? I mean, the human connection is what people really want. Is it a physical place? I don't know. I certainly believe that there will be a hybrid environment as we go forward. I think that some sectors, some leaders will continue to demand that people come into an office. I think that many employees are going to demand that they have freedom to choose. And if the performance is there, if the outcomes are there, why not encourage that? But it's about being present. It's about engaging in the right way with people and letting them know that you are, in fact, with them. And it's not a physical place. I don't believe that as we knew it. It's not a cubicle. It's not a conference room.
I'm going to give a very specific example. So bear with this hypothetical scenario, but, you know, we've seen a lot of this Silicon Valley, you know, tech conglomerates that have said, you know, flat out, hey, we don't need you back till at least June, July 2021. If you want to get that 1-year lease on that house in North Carolina, go for it, right? And so I'm wondering what happens to them. You know, do they actually end up moving back to San Francisco? And does their manager actually say, hey guys, Monday morning, you know, hope you had a nice year and a half, like, you know, working remote. This is, don't forget where to park your car. Don't, you know, make sure your company ID is activated. You know, what is those scenarios? I mean, do you think a larger share of employees are just going to be, you know, remote positions, are going to convert to remote positions? Or, you know, Tom, you said that no, actually, some managers will say, hey, everyone back Monday through Friday. You know, this is just back to life.
And at that point, you and I and Karen make a choice, right? What's right for us? The same way that organizations now can recruit globally for positions, employees can make that same choice to work for global companies, right? And, you know, when you look at cultural elements and what works for everyone, just because an organization believes they have a fantastic corporate culture, maybe that culture doesn't fit me. And it's about having the ability to make the right choices now. And I think that the new frontier of a distributed workforce has opened that up. Again, it's fantastic for organizations to be able to recruit globally. It's also fantastic for employees to be able to make that choice. And that's what it's about, not being locked into having to move across the country to a destination where I don't really want to be because it's a company that I really want to engage with and they've demanded that I be there. I mean, can I effectively do something in an environment of my choice with guidelines, with boundaries, with outcomes that are desired, and doing it in a most effective way? And again, I think ultimately it comes back to most senior executive leadership understanding that there's a new way to do this in a very effective way, and it doesn't require a cubicle to accomplish that.
Karen, same question.
So 67% of CEOs in the latest KPMG CEO Outlook 2020 study said that they were able to broaden and diversify their talent pool because of the remote work that's happening. And so I bring it back to culture. You know, if your culture is such that you're trying to diversify your talent pool, giving people the opportunity to choose their life, right? And their best life setup enables you to broaden that talent pool. It's also a remarkable tool for employee loyalty and retention. I mean, think about what would happen if you were one of those people that made the investment and you moved somewhere and felt like you were at your personal and professional best because of being in that location. I mean, how would you feel and what would your loyalty to that employer be like if they said, we trust you to do your work from there. Love it. Let's align on outcomes, what our communication is going to look like. And that's fantastic. I mean, I would feel a greater degree of loyalty, and I think most people would as well. What goes with that is making sure that organizations who are going to enable a more distributed workforce going forward take a pause to revisit expected outcomes, clearly communicate those. And the communication, you know, over communication is just communication in this distributed work world. So it's understanding, what if we just want to bump into each other in the hallway, or when a decision needs to be made, what does that look like? And just revisiting some of those agreements about how that work happens, how communication happens, and how expectations have shifted, and putting really the emphasis there.
What is some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing right now in the miscommunication, particularly? I imagine, you know, obviously it's the growing pains have been large for many companies, right? Especially in the first few months, in terms of, you know, you used to see somebody at their desk doing their work, and now you might not hear from them all morning, which is, you know, maybe normal in the office, but not so much on, you know, in the digital world. So what are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing happening right now? Is it just, I assume, like not enough communication, or is it maybe the opposite? Some managers are kind of breathing down their employees' throats too much with Slack.
Well, there's certainly a range of scenarios, and I really appreciated the candor of one CEO. He was doing a fireside chat with me about the working from home book, and he said to this big group of CEOs, listen, I've been a successful CEO for decades, and I've never received a single minute of training in my entire career about how to lead and motivate a workforce I can't see. So that 43% of employees working from home for the first time includes CEOs. and chief HR officers and people managers. And so the reality is, I think the first thing that we're challenged with is just inexperience at doing this. Not everyone has experience leading a virtual team. So I would just first take a pause and assess, hey, some things probably went well about that, and some others might not have gone as you planned. What employees most report, 89% in a recent study, saying they do not feel acknowledged. So people don't feel seen and recognized for their work. It was a challenge we all heard when we were in the office. It's become compounded because what happens is we get in this meeting mode and then we get in this task mode, and people aren't necessarily feeling seen, heard, and acknowledged for their work. And it's compounded by the fact that we can't bump into each other in the hallway, right, to check in on how things are going. And then we're operating in a totally different context where we have less nonverbal feedback. So what great leaders and great organizations are doing is taking a pause to say, hey, you know what, for better or for worse, we survived to this point. What adjustments do we need to make going forward so that people feel connected, they're clear about what they own, and they feel seen and heard for the work that they're doing and the contribution they're making?
Great point. So Mike is joining the room. We've been getting some questions from the audience, and Mike is going to go ahead and facilitate those.
Yes, the chat in this session has been on air, so we've got a bunch of questions. So the first one is, if work from home has shifted from being a perk to now being kind of the default standard, what kind of new perks do you all think that companies could or should begin to offer?
I don't know about who you're all spending time with, but I know lots of employees that would love it if every day at the end of work, the doorbell rang and someone just said, here's your dinner. This is not HelloFresh where you chop it up and make it. It's ready. I mean, in all seriousness, I think about from that perks perspective, lots of research would suggest people are looking for an adjustment to the benefits that help them navigate, their life and their own well-being in this context, which has shifted. I mean, people's childcare and schooling scenarios have shifted substantially. So benefits that look in the direction of providing that support and helping to keep, whoever the individuals are in your household that are in the workforce, as opposed to perhaps having to step away for caregiving responsibilities. So that's the first one in terms of perks. The second one is, and I think it's difficult to get there. People are trying all different versions of this. Please take time off. This is mandatory time off. Because what we're hearing even more is, for as much as people didn't take their holiday and PTO time before, they're taking even less of it now. And when they do, they still tend to work anyway because of a feeling that that's expected or that's what's necessary to keep up. So solving for that refresh, I can't tell you I have the perfect solution for it at a corporate level, but I think lots of experimentation in that space of how do we truly give people permission to take a break and honor that? Because ultimately, no one can run a marathon at full speed, for years on end.
Yeah. Yep.
And Mike, to your question, I think for many organizations, it's about finding the money, right? And with real estate cost reduction, the money is there for those perks and meaningful things that relate to better insurance benefits, maybe continuing education opportunities, professional coaching opportunities. The dollars are certainly there now for those material things that matter for career growth. I would love a dinner at the end of the day, Karen. I'd love that. I'd love, having someone with confidence to say, you know what, this is a no meeting Friday. Those are great kinds of perks, but what's meaningful for career development and what would help people the most with this? The money is there. I mean, real estate cost reductions alone pays for a whole lot, doesn't it? And reduction in T&L pays for a whole lot with respect to things that really matter to people.
That's actually a button topic. That was another question that I got on here. I won't go down the road of my past experience in corporate life, but when I was assigned working from home before pandemic, I wasn't given any stipend to outfit an office, right? They just assumed I would be doing that. Do we see companies starting to shift and realize, maybe not all my employees have a home office, or maybe they're sharing an apartment with two other roommates, or maybe we need to give them a standing desk? Do we see any kind of mentality or kind of awakening from that perspective?
Many organizations are offering, a stipend. I mean, Salesforce does $500 for employees, and every organization is a little bit different. But yes, most of the organizations I work with are offering that now.
Yeah. That's great. So in addition to those tools that we expect, whether it be tablets or laptops and cell phones, yes, stipends. Many organizations we talk with, HR executives are absolutely mentioning that as part of the onboarding process and getting people, continuing through the organization, the experience of the employee with the organization is doing that. And I think it's particularly important when you look at, is streamlining employee experience more than just another phrase, and does it take into account not only the full-time engagement, Mike, and all, but also part-time employees, consultants, contractors, and, really encouraging them in the right way. So these stipends not being limited simply to, okay, Tom is a full-time employee of company XYZ, so he's entitled to this. Again, finding the money, the dollars are there in so many ways now to really build a very powerful organization. Includes part-time contractors, consultants across the board.
Great. We've got another question. Sorry, Uptin.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, okay. We had another question that came in that said, if the physical office is, not quote unquote dead, but evolving or whatnot, what do you all think the future of the office looks like from a VR perspective? There's a lot of talk about 5G making a large impact. Do you all see anything like right now, tools or initiatives where, VR kind of might fill the gap between that camaraderie or running into someone virtually at the water cooler rather than in a Zoom room?
I'll share an example of one of our clients. They have data centers, and part of, how they get their customers to say yes and make an investment is touring the data center. I mean, literally seeing, where their assets are going to reside. And certainly that's not possible for a myriad of reasons during this time. And this is what they switched to as their alternative. So you receive kind of like these, the glasses, goggles, in the mail, and you're going to have this whole experience of doing like a virtual guide through their data center. And they still have, a tour guide that kind of pops up, into your, in this case, augmented reality world. And they're having some good success. Then, of course, you send it back, they sterilize it, they can reuse it. And they're trying out that experience. I'm excited because I think this is a time of innovation, and lots of wonderful, smart tech people will come up with ways to enhance these tools and do more to replicate the feeling of being in person. Ultimately, I don't think anything will ever replace what it's like to sit down with someone over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and build a relationship and a connection. I don't think any technology, no matter how great, will ever be able to fully take the place of that.
I think virtual reality is a pretty cool concept to think about, but we're longing for the employee connection. I think when we have the opportunity for a hybrid environment or that type of collaboration, I think people, embrace that. Now, you mentioned 5G, Mike. You look at certain cities, Chattanooga, Tennessee in the U.S. being one of them that have opened up 5G citywide. It does create such tremendous opportunity on different levels for people. But I still think people, given the opportunity for a human connection, they're going to grasp that. Virtual reality is cool. It's tricky. Yeah. It's nice, but I like people. I like being around people.
The human connection, as some of the fellow attendees noted, has really been the overarching pick in this session and others. We have a question from Gren that asked about how there's kind of a line where jobs may be at risk of not being promoted, or individuals might not be promoted because they're working remotely and they don't have that connection, or through the globalization of talent, like what we saw with the previous presentation from freelancer.com, the talent pool is somewhere else. So it might go to a lowest bidder. How do companies navigate that and keep that balance for the engaging their existing employees, but also with an eye on their bottom line? Deliver
results that are relevant. Deliver relevant results. That's the most powerful tool to differentiate yourself and to remain in the role you're in and have opportunities to advance. The other aspect is invest in how you tell your story. I am amazed at the number of working adults and adults seeking jobs who, when asked the simple question they know they will receive, what are your strengths or what do you do best, give an answer that sounds like it came from a Dilbert comic strip. I'm a team player, and all I really just want is an opportunity to contribute and continue to grow my career and to really step up and learn from someone amazing. That's great. I don't understand why that's different than anybody else, right? What is your story? What are the 3 to 5 words that articulate your strengths? What are a couple of examples? Bless you, Uptin. What are a couple of examples of outcomes you've delivered? And how can you put your strengths to work to deliver outcomes at the next level in your current company or the place where you're seeking? So differentiating your story is absolutely key. And if you want to be perceived as promotion ready, start articulating that story to your manager and aligning about it.
And one thing I just want to add to what Karen said, because, you know, as a CNBC reporter for 7 years, I've seen hundreds of startups pitch and interviewed hundreds of executives, and the amount of people that tell their story with generalizations, right? Oh, I'm a B2B solution SaaS platform that enables blah, 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 right? It kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But when you can actually say, you know, imagine the farmer in Vietnam and the grocery store owner in Chicago. Right now they're spending, you know, 40% of that financial transaction is going to the middleman. My app reduces that to 5%. It's like, boom, right? And same thing in Karen's example of an employee that's being interviewed. It's like, you're a team player, great. Give me an example. Tell me about that time where, you know, be very specific, that time in 2017 where this happened, right? Show, don't tell. And I think, you know, I'm really glad you hit on that. And I think it's such an important thing for people right now, especially with, you know, being bombarded with information and you know, posts and views and videos and things like that, that it's like, how do you differentiate your story, whether it's your personal brand or your company's brand, to others?
The simplest message is the strongest. Yes, go ahead, Tom.
I think there's 2 elements there. Number one, the strongest form of self-promotion is delivering against results and creating visibility to those performance results that are presented to an organization. But the second element to that is, you know, you think back to, again, I will say, a shift in mentality with senior executive leadership believing people need to be in a certain place. And Mike, to your question specifically, does it mean to advance an organization, I need to move to this location and be in this place, or can I deliver those results virtually in a very powerful way? It has to be a shift in mindset with senior leaders. I think that employees have made that move already. They need to feel confident about being recognized and creating the right visibility. And it does come down to AI tools and information, and that information flowing to the right people to see what has been accomplished. And it's not just about results at the end of a project, at the end of a quarter, at the end of the year. You think so many organizations have moved away from annual performance plans. They're looking at more, even quarterly assessments. It's more about day-to-day engagement. And it works both ways. It's not just the onus isn't just on the employee to create that visibility. The onus is on senior executives to make that shift and understand that there's a new way of working and recognize what's being contributed and see it.
Yeah. Speaking of senior executives, as someone who's worked remotely for, you know, about 8, 9, 10 years now, I was consulting a lot with executives. I find that those senior executives would travel more often. They would be more likely to be working from home, but then they wouldn't want their employees to be working remotely. So there's a question here, like, is trust the biggest problem with remote work? Is it the lack of trust between executives that have been enjoying this quote unquote perk, and that they didn't want to share that with the employees in the organization, or is there other challenges that are inherent?
Yes. How's that for an answer?
Sorry, that was a rambling question. Sorry, maybe more rhetorical.
It's all good. And with your audio breaking up, you have kind of a Louis Armstrong voice going on. So I'm just thinking to myself, it's a wonderful world. What we're solving for
is pretty bad.
I mean,
I think it's the AirPods actually.
It's all good. I mean, if called to recognize your regular voice in an audio lineup, if you've committed a crime, we're not going to select you. So you're good. I mean, totally set. What we're solving for is a trust gap. So what we're looking at is this Venn diagram intersection right here. And it's the link between leaders are asking, how do I know my employees are working? And employees are asking, how does my leader know how hard I'm working? By the way, we were solving for this in the office as well. This is not new to distributed work or virtual work, all it has done is place additional pressure and compound the challenges that organizations are facing. And Uptin, you mentioned it earlier. Some organizations are installing spyware. Well, I'm going to check and see how many minutes you're in, our apps and an email. And some are doing the every 15-minute increments. I want you reporting into the collaborative documents. Some are doing the check-in at the top of the hour. I would question, is that the most effective way to solve for the trust gap? I think distributed teams require distributed ownership. And one of the most powerful trust building tools is for leaders to get clear on the outcomes they expect their employees to deliver, and then to have an articulate conversation that says, I'm moving the line on ownership, Tom, because I see that you're ready and I now trust you to own this thing I once did. Not as a tool to get out of work because you're ready. Tom, what could you do for someone on your team to take something off your plate and have them own it going forward to make room for this?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. People will say they have knowledge about the shift and they know what should be done, but it comes back to an understanding, really understanding what people are doing, how they're engaging, and there's a difference. There's such a big difference between knowledge and understanding. People will tell you all about something. They'll tell you all about their continuity planning and all about what they're doing with DX and all about what they're doing with streamlining employee experience, but do they really understand how that impacts people? And whether it's through data tools that are collecting information seamlessly about engagement, how are those tools best empowering? How are they really enabling employees and managers in the right way? I think we need to have a step back and think about that. And again, I think the onus is on senior executives as much as the root level employee to gain a firm understanding about what that means. It's not so binary, is it? It's not binary at all.
Interesting. On that note, there's another question, and I don't want to be like a soft toss-up or plug specifically for Kim, but someone was specifically asking, how does work.com help with hybrid working?
Yeah, so the idea behind work.com is to put some modules and support tools in place that make it easy for you to communicate and connect with a distributed workforce. So ranging from health and safety data to employee communications to reskilling and retraining, as well as things like technical support. Was just added as a new module. And you can check it out. Of course, you can look at salesforcework.com. But the idea was to take some of these functions that we were used to having in the office and put technology in place that enables that and gives you a new playbook to operate that in a distributed way. And it helps out quite a lot when people are in a scenario. I mean, if you take Salesforce as a large global company, we have some places in the world where people have been able to return to the office because the context is such that that's possible. Mm-hmm. In other parts of the world, we started sending a few people back and then some exited, and other places of the world were still fully virtual. So it's designed to help navigate, how do you still access support? How do you communicate? How do you, let people know that when they're going into the office, we have some tools to keep them safe. And to make sure that they're not too close to anyone and they can get into an elevator that's not crowded, for example, and so forth. We also, by the way, if you want to look up some use cases, there's a couple that are interesting. The state of Rhode Island is using it around kind of community management, community and citizens, and keeping their communities safe. And also University of Kentucky is an example from a university perspective where they're using it in the context of students. So it's not just corporations, it's also, communities, governments, education institutions as well. So there's a variety of contexts in which it's applicable, not just, big global companies.
We've got,
also, Christopher,
I was going to say, we've got about 10 left. Uptin, there are questions, friend?
Sure. Yeah, it looks like we'll have another audience question. Christopher is asking thoughts on Microsoft Productivity Score.
Yeah, so I'll jump in there a bit. We have a pretty strong alignment with Microsoft as an organization at Prodoscore, and what we've found is that everyone is looking for a way to assimilate data from very disparate systems. And when Prodoscore offers productivity intelligence in the way of a score, We're working in concert with cloud-based applications like the Microsoft suite of apps. We work with Salesforce. We work with various UCaaS solutions, and we're aggregating that data from very disparate systems. Microsoft does a very good job at what they deliver. The one challenge that is present is it's limited to Microsoft-based tools. So, you know, what we're looking at is a different way to aggregate data from more disparate systems over and beyond, you know, the Microsoft application. So it's a bit of a different approach, but nothing positive comments certainly about Microsoft.
I want to know in our last 8 minutes or so, hacks for working from home. Karen, maybe we take I don't know if it's taking a page out of your book, but I've heard all kinds of things like, you know, if you put on shoes after you wake up, then your brain thinks that you're at work and you're more likely to be productive, and then you take your shoes off, you know, the second you're done working. I mean, what are some of your favorite hacks that can really impact people's productivity and happiness working from home?
Well, I will give you 3. So the first is routines, rituals, and boundaries. We need to put something in place that lets us know, you know, our minds especially, that we're getting ready for work and transitioning into that mode. And also critically important to put, you know, the commute or the pick your kids up from daycare into your schedule consistently at the end of the day to help you leave work. These transition rituals that I found work best tend to take anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes maximum, and they're upside to you. There's something that works for you, whether that's listening to a song, taking a walk around the block. I had one executive from Discover Financial that tells me he pictures Fred Flintstone style riding down the tail of a purple dinosaur at the end of the day, and he yells out yabba dabba doo, and then his 7-year-old son knows he's done working and he's home from the office for the day. But whatever works for you, very short increments, upside, something you can do consistently. The second one is take a pause to examine the space where you're doing your work. I mean, do you want to be there? If you're still sitting in the antique, you know, chair and you have a backache, maybe it's time to make an adjustment. When you look around, you know, what's in your line of sight that inspires you, that either reminds you about your success, keeps you grounded about where you are or where you're going. You know, what is it that helps you want to be in that space and feel good when you're there? And the third one is, you know, be clear on how your technology works. And I'll give you the simplest, most basic hack. Now, I've taken a stand against sitting. I don't use a chair at all. I always stand, or I'm on a treadmill desk so that I can be in movement. That works for me. It doesn't have to work for you. But because of that, and because of doing so many presentations, I now, to maintain the, you know, optimal camera angle for conversations like this, I literally took a piece of tape and put it on the floor. So just like a child performance on stage, I know exactly where to stand. I don't have to think about that anymore. I just stand by the tape and look, here we are. Perfect. That's my simple hack for today.
That was me this morning, Karen. I've got to
like,
just for the event. It's like, where am I going?
Yeah. I have a piece of tape. In fact, I took a picture. I was like, I should tweet this. This is like my work from home presentation hack. Tape on the floor. One less thing to think about. Perfect.
So,
I love that.
I've got a personal question come from the audience, but they don't call me the coworkaholic for nothing. Because the office is quote unquote not dead but evolving. Tom, Karen, you seen companies that have embraced flexible workspace and co-working spaces, or, you know, safe, you know, COVID-free meeting rooms as a way to either bring employees back in from home, or kind of supplement, or kind of fill this area? Any best practices or examples that you'd be able to share with that?
One of the first sectors where we saw a move like that is in financial services, and there was more of a demand for some large entities getting back to the office. But I think a shared space will continue to be an opportunity that everyone takes a look at, and absolutely a reduction in overall square footage, whether it's in a shared environment with other organizations or limited to the company that someone is employed by. I really think of that as being more of a collaboration place than a day-to-day workplace. And I don't know. It continues to evolve, but financial services, Mike, was the first where we saw that requirement come forth, and I think it's throttled back again a bit.
Yep.
Before all of this started, for our employees that were classified, in our system as full-time remote employees, they have access to a stipend to help either offset or cover the cost of these, types of alternate workspaces that you're talking about. While we don't have a program to address this one, I do give a huge shout out to Marriott and the pivot they've made in terms of rethinking their property space as an opportunity where you can come buy a day pass and kind of use that as your remote or virtual work environment, with all of their cleaning guarantees and so forth. While that's not a path that we've, gone down with our own employees, we're not, giving people money to do that. Certainly, if people are looking for an option, at least for some variety or perhaps a safe way to consider being together in person, they've put a lot of thought into how to make that pivot.
Yep. I want to ask about, kind of jumping off of that, Karen, co-working spaces, right? And I agree the Marriott, offering was quite interesting to put on the market. In terms of co-working spaces, there's somewhat of a debate out there that it's like, well, people are so used to working from home and working completely remote. Why would they bother driving to a co-working space at all? And then there's the other side that says actually co-working spaces become more valuable because of the flexibility they offer in team size. And, maybe we just need 2 days as a team to come together and then we all go back to our houses. So where do you stand on that, each of you, before we wrap?
Well, I often think about, kind of going back to that story we started with about the office, and we've turned it into a fairy tale, a mystical, magical place where dreams come true and we all live happily ever after and have marvelous careers and wonderful bosses and great colleagues who we love and adore and can't wait to see again in person. And, I was thinking about that saying of, you can't go home again. And I think in a lot of ways, we're like homesick for this environment that maybe isn't coming back. And I think the extension of that is a lot of people are like homesick, like they are sick of home. So at this point, if you offered most people the option to take their laptop and safely sit on a street corner at this point and work, they would do it. Because what we're wanting is an alternative to our dwelling unit because we're spending so much time here and we're simply just not used to that. So I think it's in your environment, I think it's less a function of where you go to do this work. It's that what I hear within that is people saying, please just let me leave this place. Like I am here all the time living and working. I mean, that's, I think, what we're really craving most. Of course, we need to be able to do that safely. I think it's less about where you go when you leave here. It's just knowing that you could go somewhere again and that someday you will leave this box and this space and see humans in person again consistently. Some that and some that are total strangers. What a revelatory thought.
Yeah.
Yep. Uptin, I'll tell you, like I fell in love with co-working because I was working from home and I hated it. I was lonely. I was isolated.